of course, she sneered, her voice a venomous whisper meant only for herself. She's in first class. That one bitter thought was all it took. For senior flight attendant Kimberly Peterson, it was the start of a power play, a way to put a passenger she'd already judged in her place. She thought she was untouchable, a queen in her airborne kingdom. She had no idea that the woman she was about to humiliate, Aaliyah Bennett, was married to the one man who could shatter her entire world with just 6 words. This isn't just a story about instant karma. It's about the catastrophic collision of prejudice and power at 35,000 feet. A single act of malice that triggered a chain reaction of public ruin, shocking twists, and a final brutal lesson that some debts are paid in full under the glaring spotlight of the entire world. Before we begin, where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments. If you love inspiring stories of resilience and justice, make sure to hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe for more incredible tales. Your support helps us share these impactful stories with even more people. Now let's get into it. The recycled air of Aura Airlines Flight 721 from New York to San Francisco had a familiar hum, a sound that was both a lullaby and a cage to Kimberly Peterson. For 22 years, this pressurized metal tube had been her dominion. She wasn't just a flight attendant. She was the senior flight attendant. Her uniform was impossibly crisp, her blonde hair coiled into a chignon so tight it seemed to pull at the corners of her eyes, giving her a look of perpetual disapproval. She moved through the first-class cabin not with the warmth of a hostess, but with the officious air of a warden patrolling a luxury cell block. Today, her patrol had a target. The target was seated in 1A. Her name was Aaliyah Bennett. She was, in Kimberly's silently curated opinion, out of place. Aaliyah was a black woman of effortless elegance. She wore a tailored cream-colored pantsuit that spoke of quiet confidence, her hair styled in intricate, beautiful braids. She had settled into her seat, placed a leather-bound sketchbook and a single pen on the small table beside her, and was now looking out the window, a serene, thoughtful expression on her face. She hadn't demanded anything. She hadn't been loud. She simply existed, and for Kimberly, that was the entire problem. "Oh, of course," Kimberly muttered under her breath as she prepared the pre-departure beverage cart, the ice clinking like tiny, angry bells. "She's in first class." Jessica, a younger flight attendant with bright, earnest eyes, was arranging champagne flutes. "What was that, Kim?" Kimberly forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Nothing, sweetie. Just making sure we have enough of the good champagne for our valued guests." The emphasis was slight, but it was there. Aaliyah, Kimberly had decided, was probably flying on points. Or maybe it was a work trip for some diversity and inclusion nonsense that companies were so fond of these days. She couldn't possibly have earned this seat. Not in the way the silver-haired man in 2B, a well-known tech investor named Mr. Davies, had. Kimberly had already Googled him on the crew computer. Her. She hadn't bothered to look up the woman in 1A. She had already written her story. The boarding process finished, and the plane began its taxi to the runway. Kimberly's service was a masterclass in passive aggression. When she took Aaliyah's drink order, her tone was clipped. "Just water for now?" she asked, a hint of surprise in her voice, as if Aaliyah were foolish for not taking advantage of the free champagne. "Yes, sparkling water with a slice of lime, please. When you have a moment," Aaliyah replied, her voice smooth as silk, her eyes never leaving her sketchbook where she was now lightly sketching the curve of a wing. Kimberly's smile tightened. "When you have a moment." The audacity. For the other passengers, she was a different person. She laughed with Mr. Davies, offering him an extra-large bowl of warmed nuts. She leaned in conspiratorially with the couple in row 3, recommending a wine pairing for their meal. But each time she passed seat 1A, a chill seemed to emanate from her. She delivered the water and placed it on the tray table with a little too much force, causing it to slosh. Aaliyah didn't react, simply picking up a napkin to dab the small spill. This lack of reaction infuriated Kimberly more than anything else. She wanted a confrontation. She wanted the woman to be difficult, to prove her preconceived notions correct. But Aaliyah remained a portrait of grace. She sketched, she read a book, she ate her meal quietly. The flight leveled off at its cruising altitude. The cabin lights were dimmed. It was the lull period, the time when Kimberly felt most powerful. Most of the passengers were watching movies or sleeping. Aaliyah had her reading light on, illuminating the pages of a novel. Kimberly saw her chance. She walked to the galley and poured a tall glass of ice water. Not sparkling, just plain, cold tap water from the aircraft system. Jessica watched her, a knot of unease forming in her stomach. "Is someone thirsty?" Jessica asked, trying to sound casual. "Passenger in 1A, Kimberly said, her voice flat. "She needs a refill." "But she didn't ask for one," Jessica pointed out. "Her glass is still half full." Kimberly picked up the glass. "It's about anticipatory service, Jessica. Something they don't teach you anymore. You have to give the passengers what they need before they know they need it." Her eyes held a strange, unsettling gleam. She walked from the galley, her steps measured and deliberate. She approached seat 1A from the side, where Aaliyah was engrossed in her book. And then, it happened. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a stumble caused by turbulence. It was a fluid, calculated motion. Kimberly tilted her wrist, and the entire glass of ice-cold water cascaded down, splashing over Aaliyah's shoulder, soaking the sleeve of her cream blazer, the pages of her book, and her seat. Ice cubes scattered across the expensive fabric. Aaliyah gasped, a sharp intake of breath from the shock and the cold. She dropped her book, which now had warped, waterlogged pages. For a moment, the only sound was the drip of water onto the carpet. Aaliyah looked up at Kimberly, her calm eyes now wide with disbelief. Kimberly put on a performance of a lifetime. "Oh my goodness, I am so sorry," she gushed, her voice dripping with fake concern. "The plane it just lurched. Are you all right?" But there had been no lurch. The plane was perfectly still. Mr. Davies in 2B, who had been watching the whole interaction over the top of his glasses, knew it. Jessica, standing by the galley, knew it. And most importantly, Aaliyah knew it. Aaliyah slowly stood up, water dripping from her sleeve. She looked at Kimberly not with anger, but with a profound, piercing disappointment. She didn't raise her voice. She simply said with chilling clarity, "There was no turbulence." Kimberly's feigned mask of concern began to crack. The woman wasn't screaming or crying. She was just staring. It was unnerving. I must have lost my footing," Kimberly stammered, grabbing a handful of napkins and making a show of dabbing uselessly at the drenched blazer. "It's these new shoes. Let me get you some towels." Aaliyah took a step back out of Kimberly's reach. Her voice remained steady, but it now carried a weight of steel. "No, thank you. I think you've done quite enough." The quiet authority in her tone drew the attention of the few other awake passengers. The illusion of a simple accident was evaporating under the cabin's dim lighting. Mr. Davies in 2B had taken off his headphones entirely. He had seen Kimberly's deliberate wrist flick. He was a lawyer by trade, and his mind was already cataloging the details of the event as a deposition. Kimberly, feeling her control slip, escalated. Her defensiveness morphed into aggression, cloaked in the language of customer service. "Ma'am, I have apologized. It was an accident. If you'll allow me to clean it up, we can move on. There's no need to make a scene." "You made the scene," Aaliyah corrected her, her gaze unwavering. "You intentionally poured that water on me. The only question I have is why." The accusation, spoken so plainly and without hysteria, hung in the air. Kimberly's face flushed a deep, blotchy red. "How dare you? I've been a flight attendant for 22 years. I would never." "Then your 22 years of experience should have taught you how to carry a glass of water," Aaliyah finished for her. This was it. The challenge Kimberly had craved, but it wasn't going the way she'd planned. She had expected tears or shouting, something she could label as unruly behavior. Instead, she got logic and composure, and it was infuriating. "I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice, ma'am," Kimberly said, her own voice rising. "You are disturbing the other passengers." "My voice is perfectly level," Aaliyah stated. "You, however, seem quite agitated. Perhaps you should get your purser." This was a calculated insult. As the senior flight attendant, Kimberly was the purser on this flight. It was a subtle way of saying, "I know how this works, and you are failing." Kimberly felt a surge of hot, reckless rage. "I am the authority on this aircraft, and I am telling you it was an accident. Now, are you going to accept my apology and sit down? Or is this going to be a problem?" Before Aaliyah could respond, a calm, deep voice came from the front of the cabin. "It's already a problem, Kimberly." Every head turned. Standing in the archway leading from the cockpit area was a tall, impeccably dressed man. He had been in the forward lavatory and had heard the commotion. He had a commanding presence, an aura of quiet power that instantly silenced the cabin. His eyes were fixed on the scene, first on Aaliyah's drenched shoulder, then on the defiant, sneering face of his flight attendant. Kimberly's jaw went slack. She knew who he was. Every employee of Aura Airlines knew who he was. Marcus Thorne, the enigmatic, brilliant, and notoriously hands-on CEO of the entire airline. He rarely flew on his own planes without notice, but his face was on the cover of every aviation trade magazine. His eyes, which were a startlingly sharp shade of blue, moved from Kimberly to Aaliyah, and his entire expression softened. He walked forward, ignoring Kimberly completely, and gently took his wife's hand. "Are you okay, darling?" Marcus Thorne asked Aaliyah Bennett. The cabin held its collective breath. Darling, his wife. Kimberly's world tilted on its axis. The blood drained from her face, leaving it a pasty white. The woman in 1A. The woman she had profiled, judged, and assaulted. This wasn't some diversity hire on a work trip. This was Aaliyah Thorne, née Bennett, the CEO's wife, an accomplished architectural designer in her own right, whose recent work on a new airport lounge was the talk of the industry. It all clicked into place with sickening horror. Aaliyah looked at her husband, and for the first time, a flicker of vulnerability showed in her eyes. "I'm fine, Marcus. Just a little wet." Marcus's jaw tightened. He turned his head slowly, his gaze falling upon Kimberly like a physical weight. The temperature in the cabin seemed to drop 20 degrees. His voice was no longer soft. It was glacial. "Kimberly Peterson," he said, the name sounding like an indictment. Kimberly could only manage a squeak. "Mr. Thorne, I was just... There was turbulence and I've been standing here for 2 minutes." Marcus cut her off, his voice lethally quiet. "This aircraft is as steady as a rock. I heard your explanation, and I heard my wife's." He took a small step closer. "Now I want you to look at me and tell me the truth." Kimberly's eyes darted around, looking for an escape. She saw Mr. Davies staring, his expression one of grim satisfaction. She saw Jessica in the galley, her face pale with fear but her eyes full of condemnation. There was no escape. She crumbled. It was an accident, I swear." Marcus stared at her for a long, silent moment. He saw everything, the petty cruelty, the years of bitterness, the ugly prejudice that had culminated in this moment. He wasn't just the CEO. He was a husband who had just seen his wife humiliated. He raised his hand slightly, not to strike, but to signal. He looked past her, making eye contact with Jessica. "Jessica," he said, his voice ringing with absolute authority. "Please take over as lead for the remainder of this flight. Escort Miss Peterson to a jump seat and inform her that under Section 4, Paragraph B of her employment contract, she is being placed on immediate unpaid leave pending an investigation." He then turned his full, undivided attention back to Kimberly, whose face was a mask of disbelief. An investigation? Leave? She could survive that. She had union protection. But Marcus wasn't finished. He let the silence stretch, letting her absorb the first blow. Then he delivered the kill shot. His voice was devoid of all emotion, a simple statement of fact. "And that investigation is now complete." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow louder than a shout. "You are terminated, effective immediately. The 6 words hung in the pressurized cabin air, more shocking than any sudden drop in altitude. You are terminated, effective immediately. For Kimberly Peterson, time seemed to fracture. The calm, authoritative face of Marcus Thorne, the stunned look on young Jessica's face, the water still dripping from Aaliyah's blazer. It all blurred into an incomprehensible nightmare. You can't, Kimberly stammered, the words catching in her throat. It was a reflex, a protest born of pure disbelief. You can't just fire me. Here, now, I have a union. There are procedures. Marcus's expression didn't change. He was no longer a husband. He was the chief executive officer, a man who commanded a fleet of 800 aircraft and 90,000 employees. He was a man who understood procedure better than she ever could. The Aura Airlines Employee Code of Conduct, which you sign annually, has a clause for gross misconduct, he stated, his voice as crisp and cold as the ice water she had spilled. Gross misconduct includes, but is not limited to, the deliberate endangerment or assault of a passenger. It allows for summary dismissal. What you did was not an accident. It was a malicious act, and you performed it on the wife of your CEO. Consider this your exit interview. He turned his back on her, a gesture of dismissal more profound than any insult. He gently guided Aaliyah toward the front galley. Let's get you a blanket, and you can sit in one of the crew rest bunks if you'd like. I'm sorry this happened, Aaliyah. I am so sorry. Kimberly was left standing alone in the aisle, the world's most expensive and public pink slip still ringing in her ears. Jessica, looking terrified but resolute, approached her. Kim, she said softly, you need to come with me. Reality crashed down on Kimberly with the force of a tidal wave. She was being demoted, humiliated, and fired in front of her colleagues and passengers. Her 22-year career was over. Her kingdom had been dissolved. No, Kimberly hissed, her eyes wild. I'm not going anywhere. He can't do this. But the passengers knew he could. Mr. Davies, the lawyer in 2B, was already typing a detailed note into his phone, time-stamped and everything. He knew a textbook case of justified termination when he saw one. The other passengers who had witnessed the event murmured amongst themselves, their sympathies entirely with the calm, dignified woman and her powerful husband. Kimberly had no allies here. From the cockpit, the captain, alerted by Marcus, emerged. He was a veteran pilot named Captain Miller, a man who respected the chain of command above all else. He saw the CEO, the CEO's drenched wife, and the senior flight attendant who looked like she was about to completely unravel. Miss Peterson, Captain Miller said, his voice leaving no room for argument. You will accompany flight attendant Jessica to the rear jump seat now, or I will have you restrained for interfering with a flight crew. The threat of being physically restrained, of being treated like a common criminal, finally broke through Kimberly's hysteria. Defeated, she allowed Jessica to lead her down the aisle, past the pitying and contemptuous stares of the passengers. It was the longest walk of her life. As the plane began its slow, inevitable descent into San Francisco, the mood in the cabin was somber. In the front, Marcus had wrapped Aaliyah in a warm blanket from the premium cabin. He sat with her, not speaking, just holding her hand, his fury now a quiet, simmering resolve. He had already made a call on the satellite phone to his head of HR and his chief legal counsel. The gears of the corporate machine were grinding into motion. They'll meet us at the gate, he told Aaliyah softly. Security will escort her off the property. She will not be permitted to fly on Aura Airlines again, not even as a passenger. She's blacklisted. Aaliyah leaned her head on his shoulder. She wasn't triumphant. She just felt weary. It wasn't about me, was it, Marcus? It could have been anyone. Yes, he said, his voice tight. But it was you, and that makes it my business. When the plane finally docked at the gate in SFO, the normal bustle of deplaning was replaced by a tense silence. The passengers in first class were asked to remain seated. 2 stern-looking airport security officers and a woman in a sharp business suit, the head of West Coast HR for Aura, boarded the aircraft. They walked directly to the back where Kimberly sat, stony-faced, on the jump seat. "Kimberly Peterson?" the HR woman asked, though she already knew the answer. "I'm Sarah Chen from corporate. Please come with us. We need to collect your ID and finalize your separation paperwork." The passengers watched in silence as Kimberly, the once proud queen of the cabin, was escorted off the plane like a prisoner. She didn't look at anyone. Her public humiliation was complete. As Marcus and Aaliyah finally deplaned, Mr. Davies stopped them. "Mr. Thorne, Mrs. Thorne," he said respectfully. "My name is Arthur Davies. I was in seat 2B. I saw the entire incident. It was unconscionable. If you need a witness for any proceedings, union grievances, or anything else, here is my card. I have already made a detailed, time-stamped account of the event." Marcus took the card, his expression grateful. "Thank you, Mr. Davies. That means a great deal." The incident, it seemed, was over. Justice had been swift, brutal, and absolute. But in the modern world, stories don't end when the plane lands. They are just beginning. And Kimberly Peterson, stripped of her career and her dignity, was about to discover that karma wasn't just about losing your job. It was about losing everything else, too. The first 48 hours after the landing were a blur of antiseptic corporate procedure for Kimberly. She was processed out at a soulless HR office near the airport, her wings literally and figuratively clipped as she surrendered her company ID. The union representative, a portly, world-weary man named Frank, had met her there. He had listened to her frantic, revised version of the story, a version where a clumsy stumble met an aggressive, entitled passenger who had it in for her from the start. Frank had listened with a practiced, non-committal nod. "Okay, Kim, we'll file a grievance for wrongful termination, but you need to be straight with me. Were there witnesses?" "A few," Kimberly admitted, downplaying it. "But they didn't see it clearly, and the passenger's husband is the CEO. This is a clear abuse of power. He's trying to protect his wife." Frank sighed, a sound heavy with the ghosts of 1,000 similar hopeless cases. "The CEO part is what's going to kill us, Kim. They'll bring out the big guns. They'll say you assaulted a passenger. If they can prove intent, the union's hands are tied. Gross misconduct trumps the collective bargaining agreement every time." Kimberly left the meeting feeling a flicker of her old indignation. She would fight this. She was the victim here, a loyal 22-year employee thrown to the wolves by a power-hungry billionaire. That bravado lasted until she tried to log into her employee portal to check her final pay stub. Access denied. She tried to use her flight benefits to book a trip home. Account invalid. The digital doors of her life were slamming shut, one by one. The real spiral began a week later. News of the in-flight incident hadn't gone public, but within the tight-knit world of aviation, it had spread like wildfire. Every pilot, flight attendant, and gate agent from American to Delta seemed to have heard a version of the story. Kimberly's name was attached to all of them. She applied for a flight attendant position at a rival legacy carrier, confident her 2 decades of experience would make her a shoo-in. She received a polite rejection email within 3 hours. She applied to a budget airline, swallowing her pride. Silence. She applied to a major international carrier. Nothing. She called an old friend, a scheduler at another airline. "Brenda, it's Kim. Can you look into my application? I feel like I'm being ghosted." Brenda's voice was strained. "Oh, Kim, I can't help you. The word is out. They've flagged your file. Nobody will touch you." "Flagged my file? For what?" Kimberly demanded. "Assaulting a passenger, creating a hostile environment. They're saying it was racially motivated." Brenda whispered the last part, as if the words themselves were radioactive. "That's a lie," Kimberly shrieked into the phone. "She was just difficult." "The passenger was Aaliyah Bennett," Brenda said quietly. "She's one of the most respected designers in the hospitality space, and she's married to Marcus Thorne. You picked the wrong person, Kim. Nobody is going to risk crossing him. You're blacklisted. It's not official, but it's real." The phone call ended, and Kimberly was left in the sterile silence of her beige suburban apartment, a place paid for by a job she no longer had. The blacklisting was a death sentence. Her only marketable skill, the only life she'd known for over 2 decades, was gone. Panic began to set in. Her savings were decent but not infinite. The mortgage, the car payment, the credit card bills, they were all relentless. She saw an ad for a customer service position at a high-end department store. The pay was a quarter of what she used to make. She applied. During the interview, the manager said, "Your resume says you spent 22 years with Aura Airlines. Why did you leave such a stable career?" Kimberly froze. I was looking for a change, less travel." The manager's polite smile didn't waver. "We do a thorough background check here. Would there be any issues with us contacting Aura for a reference?" Kimberly knew what Aura's HR department would say. They wouldn't even need to be malicious. The simple, factual statement, terminated for gross misconduct, was enough to poison any well. She withdrew her application. Her world shrank. Her former colleagues stopped returning her calls. They had careers to protect. The initial sympathy from a few old-timers evaporated as the details of the incident, the target being the CEO's wife, the lack of turbulence, the other witnesses, became clearer. She was no longer a martyr. She was a liability. Her days became a monotonous loop of daytime television, fruitless online job searches, and staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment she'd picked up that glass of water. Why had she done it? It was a toxic impulse, a lifetime of small resentments and curdled ambitions that had finally boiled over. She had wanted to feel powerful, to put someone in their place. And in doing so, she had erased herself. 2 months after the incident, her union rep Frank called. His voice was flat, devoid of hope. "Kim, I have bad news. Aura's legal team responded to our grievance. They have a signed, notarized statement from another first-class passenger, a man named Arthur Davies. He's a partner at a major law firm. He details the entire event, stating you acted with clear and deliberate intent. They also have a statement from the other flight attendant, Jessica. Worse, they're claiming to have a recording." A recording? Kimberly felt sick. The newer A321s have security cameras in the galleys and cabin aisles for safety. They say they have you on video, Kim. Clear as day. They're prepared to release it to the arbitrator. They're also threatening to press criminal charges for assault and file a civil suit for damages to their brand if we push this. Frank took a deep breath. The union is withdrawing the grievance. There's nothing we can do. I'm sorry. The click of the phone ending was the sound of the last door slamming shut. There was no appeal, no fight left to be had. She was alone, unemployed and unemployable. The karma was swift, but its consequences were slow, grinding her life down to dust. And Kimberly, trapped in the echo chamber of her own ruin, was about to make one last desperate move that would take her private humiliation and turn it into a global spectacle. Cornered, disgraced, and running out of money, Kimberly Peterson did what so many do when faced with the consequences of their own actions. She refused to accept them. In the dark echo chamber of her apartment, a new narrative began to form. It was a story of David and Goliath, of a working-class woman crushed by the whims of the corporate elite. She was no longer the aggressor, she was the victim. Her weapon of choice was the internet. She enlisted the help of her niece, a perpetually online 19-year-old who understood the mechanics of viral outrage. Together, they crafted a post for a crowdfunding website. They chose a platform known for championing underdog causes. The title was a masterpiece of manipulative framing. Fired by billionaire CEO for an accident. Help a 22-year veteran flight attendant get justice. The story was meticulously curated. It painted Kimberly as a doting, dedicated flight attendant. The incident was described as a minor spill caused by a sudden jarring jolt of the plane. Aaliyah was never named, but referred to as the CEO's notoriously difficult wife, a woman who was looking for a reason to complain. Marcus Thorne was portrayed as an arrogant tyrant who, in a fit of rage, fired a loyal employee on the spot without due process, all to appease his spouse. The post was accompanied by a carefully selected photo of Kimberly from 10 years prior, her smile warm, her uniform immaculate, standing in front of an airplane. She looked like everyone's favorite aunt. To launch the campaign, her niece seeded it in several popular anti-corporate and workers' rights forums on Facebook and Reddit. The initial spark caught fire. The story was simple, compelling, and hit all the right notes for an angry, populist internet. The comments started to roll in. "This is what's wrong with this country. The 1% can destroy anyone they want. 22 years of service and she gets fired on the spot? Disgusting. I'm never flying Aura Airlines again." I bet his wife is a real piece of work. Probably demanded the whole plane be rerouted for her. The donation started as a trickle, then became a steady stream. $25 here, $50 there. Within 72 hours, she had raised over $15,000. Kimberly watched the numbers climb, a giddy sense of vindication washing over her. She wasn't a racist or a bully. She was a symbol of the oppressed working class. The story was then picked up by a handful of outrage-driven blogs and second-tier news aggregators. The headline was always some variation of, "Aura Airlines CEO fires flight attendant mid-flight to please his wife." For Marcus and Aaliyah Thorne, the attack came out of nowhere. They had considered the matter closed. Marcus's PR team had monitored for chatter after the incident, but found nothing and moved on. Now, a month later, this twisted version of events was exploding online. Their phones began to buzz with alerts from their communications chief. Friends started forwarding them links to the articles with concerned messages. "Is this true? What's going on?" Aaliyah felt a knot of dread in her stomach as she read the comments. They were vile. Anonymous strangers were calling her a Karen, an entitled shrew, and worse, using racist dog whistles to describe her. Her private social media accounts were found, and trolls began flooding her posts with hateful messages. One even posted her business address. She felt violated, exposed. The quiet dignity she had maintained on the plane was being shredded in a public forum by thousands of people who had accepted a complete lie. "Marcus," she said, her voice trembling slightly as she showed him her phone. "They think I'm the villain." Marcus's face was grim. His initial, decisive action, meant to defend his wife's honor, had inadvertently opened her up to a new, more insidious form of attack. "This isn't about justice," he said, scrolling through the crowdfunding page with growing anger. "This is a shakedown. She's monetizing a lie." The situation escalated when a cable news channel, known for its contrarian and populist bent, invited Kimberly on for an interview. She appeared via webcam from her apartment, her face a carefully constructed mask of sorrow and fear. She repeated her story, crying at one point as she described the humiliation of being fired in front of everyone. "I just want my good name back," she wept. "I dedicated my life to that airline, and he took it all away in a second, just because his wife was having a bad day." The host nodded sympathetically. "It's a chilling example of corporate overreach. We reached out to Aura Airlines for comment, but they have yet to respond." The interview sent the story into overdrive. The crowdfunding total surged past $50,000. #boycott Aura started trending. The airline's stock took a small but noticeable dip. The board of directors scheduled an emergency call with Marcus. In the sterile confines of a crisis meeting, Marcus and his PR team huddled. "We can't just ignore this," said Elena, his sharp-as-a-tack head of communications. "The narrative is out of our control. Right now, she's a sympathetic victim, and you're a corporate bully." "But it's all lies." Marcus slammed his hand on the table. "We have witness statements. We have the damn video. And if we release that, we look like we're punching down," Elena countered. "A multi-billion-dollar corporation releasing secret footage to discredit a defenseless former employee. The media could spin that against us too. Intimidation tactics, invasion of privacy." It was a brilliant, wicked trap. Kimberly, by playing the victim, had made it difficult for them to present the truth without looking like bullies. Any action they took could be twisted to fit her narrative. Aaliyah, who had insisted on being in the meeting, spoke up. Her voice was quiet but firm. "So we do nothing? We let her lie. We let them call me what they're calling me." Marcus looked at his wife, at the pain and frustration in her eyes. His swift, clean justice on the plane had morphed into a messy public war. He had won the battle at 35,000 feet, but he was now in danger of losing the war on the ground. The twist was complete. The villain was now the hero, and the victims were now the accused. He knew then that a quiet, behind-the-scenes approach was no longer an option. Kimberly had made this public. He would have to end it publicly. The emergency board meeting was tense. Several members, spooked by the stock dip and the negative press, suggested a quiet settlement. "Pay her off, Marcus," urged one older board member, a man named Lawrence. "Make her sign an NDA. It's a nuisance suit. We make it go away." Marcus's eyes were cold fire. "Absolutely not. We are not paying a single dollar to a woman who assaulted my wife and is now extorting this company with a foundation of lies. This is not about money. It's about the truth." Aaliyah, sitting beside him, squeezed his hand. She had been shaken by the online attacks, but seeing Kimberly play the martyr on national television had hardened her resolve. "He's right," Aaliyah said to the board members on the video call. "If you reward this behavior, you set a precedent. You're telling every disgruntled employee that the best way to get a payout is to create a viral lie. What Kimberly did was wrong. What she's doing now is worse." Her conviction, combined with Marcus's unyielding stance, swayed the board. They gave him their reluctant blessing to handle the situation as he saw fit, with one condition: fix it and fix it fast. The counteroffensive began not with a corporate press release, but with a single elegant post on LinkedIn. It came from Arthur Davies, the lawyer from Seat 2B. He had been following the story with mounting disgust. After a brief, courteous call to Marcus Thorne to inform him of his intentions, he published his own account. His post was titled, "Truth in the Age of Outrage: My Experience on Aura Flight 721. It was devastatingly effective. In calm, precise, legalistic language, he laid out the facts. He described Kimberly Peterson's passive-aggressive behavior from the start of the flight. He detailed the water incident, stating unequivocally, "There was no turbulence. I was watching Miss Peterson directly. Her actions were not accidental. They were deliberate and, in my professional opinion, constituted an act of assault." He went on to praise Aaliyah Bennett's composure and condemned Kimberly's histrionics and subsequent dishonesty. Because he was a respected, neutral third party with no stake other than the truth, his post carried immense weight. It was shared thousands of times, primarily within professional and legal circles. The first crack in Kimberly's narrative appeared. Next, Marcus's team made a strategic move. They didn't release the security footage to a major news network, which could frame it however they wanted. Instead, they gave it exclusively to a well-respected independent aviation blogger known for his meticulous, fact-based reporting. The blogger, a man named Ben Schiller, embedded the silent 30-second video clip in a long, detailed article. The footage was damning. It was shot from a camera angle near the galley, showing a clear view of the aisle. It showed Kimberly walking steadily. It showed her approaching seat 1A, and it showed the undeniable, deliberate flick of her wrist. There was no jolt, no stumble, just a smooth, malicious act. Schiller juxtaposed the video with screenshots of Kimberly's crowdfunding page and quotes from her television interview where she explicitly blamed turbulence. The headline of his article was simple: Aura Flight 721, when video evidence contradicts a viral narrative. The internet, which had so eagerly built Kimberly up, turned on her with breathtaking speed. The same forums that had championed her were now filled with rage at being duped. "We got scammed. She lied to all of us. Look at that video. She should be in jail, not on GoFundMe. What a pathetic racist. And we all fell for it. I want my donation back." The comments on Kimberly's crowdfunding page turned vicious. The platform, facing a massive backlash and accusations of hosting a fraudulent campaign, froze her account and announced an investigation. The $58,340 she had raised was locked away, pending review. The cable news channel that had interviewed her was forced to issue a cringing on-air retraction, stating they had been provided with new information that thoroughly refutes Miss Peterson's account. The host who had been so sympathetic now looked foolish and complicit. The final blow came from within Kimberly's own ranks. Jessica, the young flight attendant, had been hounded by her union not to speak out. But seeing Kimberly's lies broadcast on TV, and with the full backing of Aura's legal department, she agreed to give a statement. Aura's PR team released it. Jessica's statement was heartbreakingly honest. She described Kimberly's initial racist comment, "Oh, of course she's in first class," and her general hostility toward Mrs. Thorne throughout the flight. She confirmed that Kimberly had taken the water without being asked, and had ignored her when she pointed out it wasn't necessary. This revelation of a racial motive was the nail in the coffin. Kimberly wasn't just a liar and a fraud. She was a bigot who had targeted a woman based on the color of her skin. The unraveling was total. In less than 48 hours, Kimberly Peterson went from a celebrated victim to a public pariah. Her friends and family, who had supported her narrative, now distanced themselves. Her niece deleted her social media accounts out of shame. Kimberly turned off her phone and unplugged her internet. But it was too late. The truth, once unleashed, was its own unstoppable force. She was trapped in the wreckage of her own creation, with nowhere left to hide. The universe does not always dispense justice with the roaring thunder of a courtroom verdict or the dramatic clang of a prison door. Sometimes its judgment is a slow, creeping frost. It is the silent, grinding erosion of a life, the gradual stripping away of everything a person once was, leaving only the hollowed-out core of their choices. For Kimberly Peterson, this was the nature of her final reckoning. It was not an event, it was a state of being. Her new life began at 11 p.m. The crisp, authoritative blazer of her old uniform was replaced by a gray, shapeless smock that smelled faintly of industrial bleach and despair. Her kingdom of the skies, a place of soft lighting, clinking glasses, and murmured deference, was traded for the dead, echoing silence of deserted office buildings. She was a member of the midnight crew for a commercial cleaning company, a ghost who haunted the spaces where important people had been just hours before. Her work was a litany of humbling tasks. She pushed a wide, dusty mop down hallways that reflected the fluorescent lights with a greasy sheen. She scrubbed toilets, her face inches from porcelain bowls in executive washrooms grander than her entire living room. She emptied trash cans, sifting through the day's refuse, discarded gourmet sandwich wrappers, crumpled spreadsheets, half-empty cups from expensive coffee shops. Each piece of garbage was a relic from a world she was no longer a part of, a world she had once looked down upon from 35,000 feet. In these silent, lonely hours, her mind was a torture chamber. The memory of Flight 721 was not a fleeting thought. It was the ambient noise of her existence. She would be wiping down a vast mahogany boardroom table and suddenly see the reflection of Aaliyah Bennett's face, the look of profound, quiet disbelief in her eyes. She would smell the lemon-scented cleaner and be instantly transported back to the moment the sparkling water with lime was ordered, a request so simple and yet so infuriating to her then. Why? The question gnawed at her, relentless and unanswerable in its truest sense. In the harsh glare of her new reality, the flimsy justifications she had built for herself had crumbled to dust. It wasn't about Aaliyah being difficult. It was about Kimberly. It was about her own life, a long, slow-motion disappointment. She had been the smart one in her family, the one who was going to travel the world and be somebody. Her younger sister had become a successful accountant, married a doctor, and had 2 perfect children who attended private school. Kimberly, meanwhile, had spent 22 years serving drinks, her youth fading in the recycled air of countless red-eyes. The senior flight attendant title, the crisp uniform, the sliver of authority over her metal tube. That was all she had. It was her identity, the entire foundation of her self-worth. Aaliyah Bennett, with her effortless elegance, her quiet confidence, and her seat in 1A, had been a walking, breathing symbol of everything Kimberly felt she had been denied. The prejudice was her weapon, a shortcut to feeling superior. In that moment, diminishing Aaliyah felt like elevating herself. Pouring that water was a desperate, pathetic attempt to prove she still had power, that she could still make an impact on someone's day. And she had. Oh, she had. Her ruin was absolute. She was not just poor, she was anonymous. In her old life, people looked at her. Passengers sought her approval. Junior attendants feared her criticism. She wore a name tag, Kimberly, and it meant something. Now, she was invisible. The late working security guards barely nodded at her. The office workers who occasionally passed her on their way out looked through her as if she were a piece of furniture. To be a janitor is to be unseen, and for a woman whose entire ego was built on being seen, it was a uniquely cruel form of damnation. Meanwhile, in a sun-drenched home overlooking the Pacific, Aaliyah and Marcus Thorne were navigating the quiet aftermath. The storm of the viral scandal had passed, but it had permanently altered their landscape. One evening, months later, Aaliyah was sketching in a notebook just as she had been on the plane. Marcus watched her, a lingering protectiveness in his eyes. "You're still wary when your phone buzzes," he said softly. It wasn't a question. Aaliyah looked up, her pencil pausing. "A little," she admitted. "It's strange. For a week, my name, my face, my work, it felt like it belonged to a mob. They could twist it into anything they wanted. I know we won. I know the truth came out. But a part of me still feels exposed, like a digital phantom limb." Marcus closed his laptop and moved to sit beside her. "I think about it all the time," he confessed, his voice low. "I wonder if I did the right thing, not firing her. That was a given, but doing it so publicly, so brutally, it set her on a path of desperation. That desperation is what led to her lashing out, to her putting you through that public nightmare." Aaliyah took his hand. Her touch was firm, grounding. "Marcus, look at me. You reacted as a husband. You saw someone hurt me and you defended me. The way she chose to handle her consequences is on her, not you. What we do now, that's on us." This had become their mantra. What we do now. They had funneled the ugly energy of the event into creation. Marcus's new training program at Aura, the Dignity Mandate, was revolutionary for the industry. He would sometimes sit in on the sessions, watching new flight attendants role-play difficult scenarios. He told them, "Your job is not to serve, it is to host. A servant is invisible. A host is present, gracious, and has a duty of care to every single person who enters their space, regardless of who they are. The moment you make a passenger feel invisible, you have failed." Aaliyah, in turn, had poured her energy into her foundation. She secured a massive grant from Aura Airlines, a grant Marcus insisted be vetted and approved by an independent committee to avoid any claims of impropriety, and launched a mentorship program connecting brilliant young artists and designers from underserved communities with industry leaders. The inaugural charity gala was to be its official launch. The gala was held at the city's most prestigious event center, a soaring structure of glass and steel. On the night of the event, the building buzzed with the energy of the city's elite, and in the gleaming service corridors, far from the champagne and string quartet, Kimberly Peterson was pushing a large rubber-wheeled bin filled with dirty linen. Her crew had been assigned the gala as an all-hands-on-deck event. Kimberly hadn't known what it was for. She just knew it meant extra hours and a late finish. She was tasked with keeping the guest washrooms pristine, a Sisyphean battle against water splashes, discarded paper towels, and the general entropy of a large crowd. She worked on autopilot, her movements mechanical, her face a neutral mask. She was invisible, a ghost in a gray smock, tidying the edges of a party she could never attend. As she restocked the towels in the ladies' room, two women came in, their gowns rustling, their laughter echoing off the marble. Aaliyah Thorne is just incredible, isn't she? One said, reapplying her lipstick. To take something so vile and personal and turn it into this. It's alchemy. I know, the other agreed. I read that awful story. I can't imagine. And her speech just now. So much grace, not a drop of bitterness. Kimberly froze behind the stall door, a stack of paper towels clutched in her hand. Aaliyah Thorne, the gala. The blood drained from her face, leaving a cold, tingling numbness. She was cleaning the toilets at her victim's triumph. She fled the washroom, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had to get out, but her supervisor, a stern man named Jorge, intercepted her in the hallway. "Peterson, where are you going? The West Hall carpet needs a pass before the dessert course." Someone dropped a whole tray of canapes. Now. Trapped, she retrieved the spot cleaner and the vacuum. The West Hall ran alongside the grand ballroom. As she worked, a set of double doors opened, and a wave of sound washed over her. The warm, resonant murmur of hundreds of people, the clink of glasses and a voice. It was Aaliyah's voice, amplified by a microphone, yet retaining its signature smoothness and warmth. Kimberly couldn't make out the exact words, only the cadence, calm, confident, inspiring. And then came the applause. It wasn't polite clapping. It was a wave, a crescendo, a roar of admiration, a standing ovation. Kimberly stood paralyzed, the vacuum hose limp in her hand. She looked up and saw a security monitor mounted on the wall. It showed a live feed of the stage. There she was, Aaliyah Bennett Thorne, bathed in a warm spotlight, her elegant braids shimmering, her hand on her heart as she acknowledged the crowd. She looked strong, she looked happy, she looked invincible. In that single, searing moment, Kimberly's reckoning was complete. It wasn't about the lost job or the empty bank account. It was about this. It was the stark, undeniable truth that her petty act of malice had not diminished its target. It had revealed her. It had amplified her. Kimberly had tried to put a woman she deemed unworthy in her place, and the universe had responded by showing Kimberly hers. She had tried to make Aaliyah small, and in the end, the only person she had managed to shrink, the only life she had managed to ruin, was her own. The applause finally subsided. The doors to the ballroom closed, muffling the sound. Kimberly was left alone in the hallway, the drone of the vacuum cleaner the only sound in her world. She finished the carpet. She emptied the vacuum bag. She clocked out. She walked out of the glass building and into the pre-dawn chill, just another invisible shadow in a city that was waking up to a brand new day. And so, a single hateful act at 35,000 feet didn't just end a career. It exposed a truth that resonates far beyond one flight. It shows that in our hyper-connected world, the truth has a way of fighting its way to the surface, and the consequences for deceit are often more devastating than the original crime. Kimberly Peterson didn't just lose her job. She lost her name, her reputation, and her future, all because she chose malice over basic human decency. Aaliyah and Marcus Thorne, on the other hand, turned an ugly personal attack into a catalyst for widespread positive change. What do you think? Was the instant firing justified, or was it an abuse of power regardless of the circumstances? What is the right way to fight back when a lie about you goes viral? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.